I think one of the very best things about superheroes is how the genre and formula inherently draws attention to the dichotomy between identity and presentation. Your face and the mask that lies on top for the sake of your livelihood, your true feelings, and what you carry out every day. And my two favorite works of the superhero genre are not only just amazing shows in their own right, but when placed side by side, they create a fascinating case study for the humanity of superheroes and the baggage of their jobs within their narrative sphere. Those being Justice League in tandem with its later seasons branded Justice League Unlimited and Batman the Brave and the Bold. Two shows I originally tied into this one video because reports circulated that both would be removed from HBO Max on January 31st of this year. Though as I make this addendum to my script, this seems to have not come to pass. With that in mind, this video was originally an impassioned plea to support the shows on other platforms, so I suppose now one can take it as a warning that even masterpieces like these have an accessibility that is fleeting, and especially when their home is HBO, one may want to be mindful to act on experiencing them. But of course, I still have the job of telling you why you should in the first place. Bruce Timm's Justice League cartoon was a serious trailblazer, not because it was the first cartoon to assemble an alliance of superheroes. In fact, the inspiration for this show is the very contrary quality to that notion. The creators behind Justice League took distinct inspiration from the Hanna-Barbera DC cartoons, most notably the Super Friends. Super Friends was, of course, intended for young audiences, and while I have nothing but respect for the people behind the show, I don't think I'm out of line when I say they were produced during an era of less respect for such a target demographic's narrative tastes, or a budget to far outpace such intentions. As such, Super Friends was a very straightforward series. As the name suggests, it was an uplifting show about a diverse crew of well-meaning heroes who share a goal of justice, and I think that's hard to find genuine fault in. But when the ambitious idea to cross over the popular Superman and Batman animated series with even more superheroes into a full-on Justice League series was greenlit, the talented writers behind the show wanted to challenge themselves, very distinctly citing the chummy dynamic of Super Friends as something they wanted to subvert. When pitching the show, measures were taken to make absolutely certain the characters' personalities would not overlap, going as far as to forego the more famous Hal Jordan and Barry Allen versions of Green Lantern and Flash in favor of the identities of Jon Stewart and Wally West, out of concern the former choices' wisecracking chief personalities might be too close together, opting for a Green Lantern who could stand as the professional militant and a Flash with the stripes of a friendly neighborhood rookie hero, personalities that would blend with the stern and calculated Batman, incorruptible and steadfast Superman, the wise and worldly Wonder Woman, the abrasive outsider Hawkgirl, and the bewildered but big-hearted Martian Manhunter. Such a huge cast with such a cocktail of personalities was precisely what this Justice League cartoon would thrive on. A series where instead of a crew of heroes that always had the same goal and reasonably point of view, no small part of the battle before taking down Lex Luthor or saving Gotham for Justice League was butting heads over the approach that would be taken. A viewer would rarely doubt that the main cast were all close friends, but all the more germane to that notion was how frequently these characters would fail to see eye to eye, as their personal values would often counter the task at hand. This could be one's past baggage, such as Superman's stubborn reluctance to help the planet Apocalypse during a time of disaster, to the frustration of fellow heroes who took a creed to protect any planet, to John's feelings for his teammates coming to a head and how it compromises his interests during an invasion of said teammate species. This was such a prominent element of the show's writing that it was sometimes exploited in-universe, a memorable outing being that Gorilla Grodd used his telepathic powers to increase the irritability between the League members, festering the already present tensions of the League to the point that they would briefly disband. That said, what always mattered was the fact that the League, like any friends, were highly capable of showing compassion and reconciling or welcoming one another with open arms. Superman in particular could at times appear uncompromising, eager to bear the brunt of the League's burdens as the de facto strongest member of the team, which was frequently a stressor for his comrades, but he's still the big teddy bear who happily brought home John Jones for Christmas. It's this dichotomy that makes him human, just as every character in the cast is. That's why the points where the characters disagree sometimes hit like a truck. Their voices and personalities are so authentic, it frequently feels like a workplace team meeting gone wrong. And sometimes characters would stop being friends for huge spans of episodic story at a time. Conflicts like Diana's feelings of betrayal towards Hawkgirl aren't the kind that could be wrapped up in a single episode and status quo'd away, and the show treated those emotions with enough respect to let them breathe and stay consistent over the course of multiple seasons until they came to an organic solution. This helped Justice League feel less like a Saturday morning cartoon and more like a weekly serial, a pedigree helped by the show's voice cast. Even for small roles, the series often employed actors with history on long-running thriller and drama series, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Wonder Years, and General Hospital, among a similar ilk. Which sounds counterintuitive for voices of animated superheroes, but that non-traditional mentality put the human qualities of the characters first. And while I would never dream of letting this analysis implicate that these particular camera actors are in any way inherently superior to more consistently bastioned cartoon actors, the pedigree of these performers from daytime drama and soap operas allowed the occasional interpersonal melodrama these characters dealt with to feel all the more genuine. Watching characters like these struggle to maintain privacy, relationships, and personal fulfillment was precisely what helped Justice League achieve the mission statement of subverting the classic cartoon antics of Super Friends, an energy that's actually preserved in the spirit of the other cartoon we're covering in this video, Batman, the Brave and the Bold. Despite having Batman as the titular and pivotal character, Brave and the Bold is not another Gotham Place mystery show by any means. Rather, it uses Batman as a focal point for the strangest and most colorful corners of the DC universe, alongside classics like Aquaman and Green Arrow. You'll see team-ups with the zanier likes of the literally malleable Plastic Man and the janitor-turned-superhero Booster Gold. In fact, let me describe 3 esoteric DC heroes, and just to illustrate how bonkers these characters could get, you guess which of these 3 was too strange to be nowhere to be found in Brave and the Bold. Is it Kamandi, a boy stranded in a dystopian future where he rebels against a higher order of tyrannical furries? Detective Chimp, a talking ape who fancies himself a Sherlock Holmes-esque sleuth, chews on a corncob pipe instead of suburban ladies' faces? Or the Haunted Tank, a military assault vehicle haunted by the spirit of a long-dead Confederate soldier. If you guessed any of the 3 were the one that was too bizarre for Brave and the Bold to include, you're wrong, because that was a trick question and it used all 3. And it's that eagerness to embrace the most offbeat and imaginative characters of DC that makes Brave and the Bold so memorable. While Justice League emphasized what was beneath the mask, Brave and the Bold's focus was the mask itself, and the bright and full-hearted spirit that made comics fun. The absurd but engaging premises that made those old 25-cent issues spring off the shelves and into the hands of superheroes' earliest fans. That's not to say Brave and the Bold lacked heart. Quite to the contrary. While the emotional core of Justice League was turmoil that lied with one's personal struggles, begotten by their freedom to move between their heroic and civilian identities, Brave and the Bold seems to posit that one's dual personas are tied together, and one can't escape the other, as the most harrowing interpersonal themes of Brave and the Bold revolve around feelings of inadequacy and question of one's validity as a hero. As many characters' greatest fears often come true in the form of their goals as a hero being something they fall short of. The episode Requiem for a Scarlet Speedster sees the Flash undergoing a mysterious appearance, and he's genuinely missed by his rogues as if they were co-workers only opposing one another in a day-to-day job of superhero and villain. Their dynamic, no matter how adversarious, is something they respectively cherish. As if superhero and supervillain were literally job titles and they'd otherwise appreciate each other's company and are only fighting out of obligation to their livelihood. A very different flavor from how sometimes even sworn allies within the Justice League couldn't manage to get along. It's in this way that the individuality of each hero is such a crucial thing in the universe of Brave and the Bold, an element emphasized in the episode Knights of the Batmen, where Batman incurs a crippling injury and must rely on his allies to act as surrogates for him until he heals. And in trying to emulate Batman's trademarks, they all fall flat, as they learn they can't fill someone else's niche or fall into a crowded league. They have to rely on their own heroic qualities, something that speaks to the ensemble-driven nature of Brave and the Bold and superheroes as a whole, and the wide span of creative characters the medium of superheroes allows. With this in mind, Batman is a perfect point of view character. He's something of an everyman among superheroes with no superpowers and a pretty straightforward skill set. It was rarely hard to write a reason he'd need help from an out-there fellow crime fighter, as well as the fact that Batman is a paragon of commitment and professionalism. Funny as it sounds to say about a vigilante, he's not known for letting personal issues get in the way of his end goal. As such, he's a perfect role model for younger heroes of the show looking to get their start, as well as someone who can learn from the older faces of DC heroics about being in touch with his more tender side. That's not to say Batman never brought his baggage to the forefront, most notably seen in the episode Chill of the Night, where he confronts the murderer of his parents, Joe Chill, and Batman must reckon with his righteous fury and how to seek catharsis while retaining his code of justice. I really want to zero in on the fact that in Brave and the Bold, Batman's struggle is which action in dealing with Joe Chill is most true to his credo as a hero, while in Justice League, what's more on his mind is whether or not he should act on his romantic feelings for Wonder Woman. Note how Justice League seems more interested in what is a problem for Bruce Wayne and his relationships, while Brave and the Bold asks hard questions about being Batman, the superhero. These shows pair so well together because they go hand in hand as experiences that reckon with problems one faces with the costume on and off. Hyperbole of the particular brand I'm about to employ is sometimes frustrating to me, but the statement that best illustrates how Justice League feels from my point of view is that at a certain point, it stops being a show about superheroes and is fully a show about people. People with anxieties, insecurities, and challenging relationships. And that's a challenge to apply to superheroes, let alone to villains. Villain in some cases being a relative term for the antagonists of Justice League, including Amanda Waller, the head of Cadmus. Rather than choosing someone with potential to sell slews of action figures or anything of the sort, Justice League, for a prominent chunk of its run, chose a main antagonist in the form of someone with no superpowers or bombastic utility belts. Rather, Waller relied on her intellect and staunch values to cause tension for the Justice League. She isn't a malicious figure, but someone who believes strongly in keeping superhumans in check, using her vast resources to assure the Justice League not make a move without her awareness and approval. Waller is intimidating and fearless, to the point she can stare Batman back in the face and give his own bark with bite to match. She isn't just a brick wall of intense personal strength. We learn as the series progresses that she's actually pious to religion, and that in her later years, her position as a God-fearing woman would rub shoulders with her identity as a seeker and exploiter of insane power. Though such qualities are perhaps more accessible to someone who isn't constantly in costume, but human introspection and even genre savviness is prevalent throughout the ostensible jobbers of Justice League's villain gallery, even in small bites. The Shade is a villain who places self-preservation above all else, constantly deliberating whether or not he's going to be paid properly for his work in Lex Luthor's Injustice League. And when he's offered to join Grodd's second villain team, the Secret Society, he shows very honest and understandable reluctance, reflecting on the folly of being a superpowered thug, seemingly destined to be humiliated by ultra-powerful superheroes. Once talked into the operation, he displays very specific training utilized with intention to bolster his own weak points, intent not to relive his humiliation at the hands of the Justice League by learning martial arts that at least briefly rival Batman's. This is honestly insane character intention and growth for someone who could just be that DC villain that throws shadows. And we see this throughout the villains in this show. The fact that being warped to an alternate dimension has Copperhead frantic that he's been banished to hell, and the fact that Atomic Skull is a walking nuclear reactor who's actually just a nervous dork. This show never forgets to blend the idiosyncrasies of these characters with the fact that they're ultimately just guys. The villains of Justice League have these clearly defined limits and boundaries that make them so human, a quality that comes to play in one of my favorite episodes, Alive. This episode flips the scope of the series' writing and focuses on Lex Luthor, who makes such an organic bad guy protagonist, one of the many qualities that makes this show's particular take on Lex, without hyperbole, my favorite villain ever. Lex has taken control of the Legion of Doom, an army of supervillains who he intends to exploit on his endeavor to revive Brainiac, who's the linchpin of the closest Lex has been to the godlike power he covets. And throughout the episode, Lex builds and burns bridges in equal measure. He bullies any Legion of Doom members who question his authority, while others find solace in loyalty to him. Even in just small exchanges and touches, we're introduced to a pretty good reason for any number of villains to either side with or against Lex. And it ends in this wildly cathartic mute where Lex's chief rival for leadership, Gorilla Grodd, leads the villains Lex has mistreated against his loyalists, resulting in this beautifully chaotic battle royale between the costumed villains. DC has no shortage of funny-looking guys in costume to fill crowd shots with. But you'll notice everyone standing against Lex had some reason to, and everyone loyal to him had a motivation as well. The writing crew of the show was so committed to justifying every character's stance, even for small-time crooks who were just meant to be set dressing. As a testament to that notion, you know who was never once in a Legion of Doom crowd shot? Ultra Humanite, a villain who was previously in league with the villains in the Legion of Doom, and could easily simply be drawn into these huge ensemble group gatherings. But he's since reformed in a prior heartfelt episode, meaning his inclusion in the Legion would be, however frivolously, unfaithful to his character. This is significant because one cannot ask an animation studio to simply fill a crowd with random faces. Every single design must be submitted, a process which costs time and money. Meaning instead of saving this cost, as I imagine many would, and utilizing every villain design they had, including Ultra Humanite, they drew brand new characters and submitted them, so not to undo his arc. Every single character who walked on screen had integrity that was paramount to the writers of the show, making it easy to get attached even to the most minor of names. While Brave and the Bold may not boast such complex arcs, it compensates by using that malleability to put its villains in positions you'd find nowhere else. Similar to how Batman seems to know every hero and have them on speed dial, the villains seem equally in league without condition, allowing alliances and crossover that are just as off the wall as the schemes they employ. One of DC's chief magic users, Felix Faust, is often reserved for sparing, game-changing events because his arcane powers are too lethal for everyday capers. But in Brave and the Bold, where everything is cranked to 11 anyway, he's given a very interesting opportunity to work for Lex Luthor or even rogues on the streets of Gotham, such as the occasion where a spurned and vengeful Batwoman approaches the dark side by getting Felix to switch her body with Batman's so she can closely approach and claim vengeance on the Riddler, who exposed her secret identity. In other continuities, a character like Faust, who reckons with apocalyptic terror opposing the likes of Wonder Woman and Black Adam, interfering in street-level affairs would be hard to justify. But the mixing pot Brave and the Bold creates makes it pretty easy to swallow, and allows it to be one of the only playgrounds where something like that can occur. Take also the Triumvirate of Terror, where Lex Luthor, the Joker, and Cheetah devise to rid one another of their respective enemies, trading places and creating a story where Joker invades Themyscira in drag and infects the warriors of the populace with his Joker venom, while Cheetah lays out Superman with kryptonite-laced nail polish. Sentences that in a more grounded sense sounds absurd, but come out believable all in the wash and incredibly fun in Brave and the Bold's flexible atmosphere. In addition to embracing this off-the-wall spirit, the writers of the show didn't just adapt elements begotten by this era of comics, but implemented elements that could fit right in. For instance, they introduced the Batman of All Nations, an antiquated UN style of Batman-styled heroes from different countries introduced in the comics, and then the writers iterated on this notion with an original creation in form of the Jokers of All Nations, demonstrating how thoroughly they've ingrained themselves with old-school comic ideas. Completely original creations like the Music Meister have even experienced a similar ascension out of their original medium in a similar vein to Harley Quinn, and have been inducted into other adaptations of the DC universe. Wholly original characters can be tricky too, especially if they make notable waves in universe. It can feel cheap if a brand new face has a heavy impact on a time-honored universe. But DC is so massive and prone to reset that it's hard to even question who is and isn't new. So new threats like the aforementioned Music Meister and world-shaking Equinox feel welcome to take familiar faces, good and bad, down a peg. In fact, the humbling of familiar faces is, in my opinion, an integral part of both of these shows' formulas. Justice League and Brave and the Bold are both shows about collaboration. I think it's incredibly important to show even our greatest heroes losing, not only in a narrative sense to help bolster a villain and the validity of their threat, but to remind everyone watching that nobody has a perfect record. And even someone with power overwhelming as Superman or Flash has blind spots they need covered, frequently by a friend. The likes of Batman and Wonder Woman have skill and experience beyond peer, but even they can find themselves out of their depth from time to time. And creating villains and situations that call for this from characters so close to in-universe godhood, I feel is not only timelessly important, but wildly impressive. And if I illustrated anything in this video, it's how these two amazing shows package these ideas in incredibly different, distinct, and equally super ways.